George Helm Jr. was born on March 23, 1950, in the village of Kaho'olawe on Molokai, Hawaii. His family lived on Hawaiian homestead land, farming and growing their own fruits and vegetables. He was the fifth of 7 children. The Helms taught their children to respect, protect, and be in harmony with nature. Aloha aina, or love of the land, was a common cultural saying. George took an interest in playing the guitar and singing from a very young age. He also played sports. In 1965, he moved from the island of Molokai to Honolulu on the island of Oahu to attend St. Louis High School, where he earned an athletic scholarship to play baseball and basketball. While playing sports, George also continued his interest in music by participating in the Glee Club. Glee Club director John Lake saw promise in George and introduced him to well-known Hawaiian historian and musician Kaho'olawe Lake. Kaho'olawe Lake was known for his unique ukulele playing style and falsetto singing. George began to take an interest in Hawaiian history, and through Lake's teaching, he learned to play and sing Hawaiian music as well as the meanings behind the songs. Lake also found that George, who had once been called Frog Voice, had a wonderful falsetto singing voice. George graduated from St. Louis High School in 1968. George attended college briefly, but soon began working for Hawaiian Airlines, which allowed him to travel the world. He traveled to places like New York City and Chicago. His mother once said that George did not really care for the big cities because of all the development and lack of respect for the land. After working with Hawaiian Airlines for a little over a year, George came back to Honolulu in 1974. Upon his return, he decided to pursue a career in music. He quickly teamed up with bass player Homer Hu, and the duo began to perform at the popular Windjammer Room at the Waikiki Holiday Inn. George then teamed up with Wayne Rice, and they began playing shows all over town. Probably George's most famous teaming was with bassist Steve Mai. They performed regularly at the Gold Corn restaurant. While performing, George began to take an interest in Hawaiian activism. George began grassroots activism with a group known as Hui Alaloa in 1975. Their goal was to gain public access to specific Hawaiian trails. In late 1975, however, George began to focus his energy and interest toward the island of Kaho'olawe. Kaho'olawe is the smallest of the 8 Hawaiian islands. It is a tiny 45 square miles and is located southwest of Maui. In 1941, during World War II, Kaho'olawe was claimed and used by the U.S. Navy as a target island for bombing practice. Since 1941, no one except the U.S. military was allowed on the island. Many Hawaiians had grown up listening to the constant explosions. The fight against the island's military occupation ushered in the Aloha Aina movement. George joined the battle to develop and maintain Native Hawaiian access rights. He showed himself to be an influential leader and public speaker. He spoke before the Hawaii State Legislature and U.S. Congress to end the target practice. George made it clear that Hawaiians wanted the government to return Kaho'olawe to the Hawaiian people. George formed a group of people, the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana, whose goal was to stop the target bombing of the island and see it return to Hawaii. In January 1976, the group made their first move. They wanted the land to be protected and preserved. The group of 9 people landed on Kaho'olawe to occupy it in protest, and the U.S. Coast Guard arrested them and removed them. The group quickly landed on the island again and again, being removed each time, but their numbers were increasing. Only because of these landings was an official archaeological survey done of a small portion of the island. The survey found nearly 30 sites that were eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Landings to the island continued, and on January 30th, 1977, 5 activists, including George, landed on the island. 3, including George, were arrested and removed, but 2 group members stayed on the island, evading arrest. The Ohana group filed a legal suit against the U.S. Navy on environmental grounds. They pored over federal laws on marine protections, endangered species, and indigenous rights, trying to find all the statutes the Navy had violated. They researched other places the Navy used for target practice. Amid all the activism, George continued his performances at the Gold Coin restaurant. In February 1977, George had arranged a meeting with President Jimmy Carter to discuss removing Kaho'olawe's status as a target island. President Carter had to cancel at the last minute. Eventually, concerned for the 2 men that were still in hiding on Kaho'olawe, George set out to the island with Kimo Mitchell and Billy Mitchell on March 5, 1977. Unknown to George, Kimo, and Billy, the 2 activists had already been removed from the island by U.S. military on that same day. The trio searched all over for them. After failing to locate the 2 men, George, Billy, and Kimo waited to be picked up by Sluggo Han, but he never came. Han's boat would later be found sunk off the pier in Kihei with its bilge plugs removed. On March 7, 1977, the trio wanted to return home, so they climbed onto 2 surfboards in an effort to paddle to Maui. The water was rough that day. On the entry to the water, George sustained a gash to his head. Due to the high surf, Billy Mitchell decided to turn back to Kaho'olawe and get help. George and Kimo Mitchell decided to paddle on. The 2 were riding on 1 surfboard. It took Billy a good part of the day to reach the shore and walk across the island to notify the Navy of the situation and to get the Coast Guard involved in a rescue operation. George Helm and Kimo Mitchell were never seen again. George was 26 and Kimo was 25. A massive search was conducted around the waters of Kaho'olawe, but only the surfboard they were riding was recovered. The Navy and Coast Guard called off their search after covering many miles of ocean. Families would continue searching for months. George would never see how the legal battle would end. Through George's and Kimo's disappearance, the Protect Kaho'olawe gained even more publicity, and the bombing stopped in the late 1980s. Years later, on October 22, 1990, President George H.W. Bush ordered all weapons delivery training on Kaho'olawe to be stopped. In 1994, President Bill Clinton returned the island of Kaho'olawe back to Hawaii. President Clinton also scheduled a massive cleanup of the island. The Navy completed its handover of Kaho'olawe in April 2004 after a 10-year, $460 million cleanup. Today, the Kaho'olawe Island Reserve Commission manages the island and works with the Ohana to preserve it. George Helm is hailed as one of the Aloha Aina movement's greatest heroes. Although his only musical recordings were made with minimal technology in a local bar, they are played regularly on Hawaiian music stations.